And hello, grade 10. So this is our new lesson for the fourth quarter. Okay. Before we start with the actual lesson, so I would like you to recall what is the difference between physical and chemical change. Okay. So when you say it's a physical change, it is a change. Sorry. And so when a substance has a physical change, there is no change in the intrinsic characteristics of the, let's say, the material or the object. So for example, if I have this paper, so for it to undergo physical change, I can fold it into two. I can fold it. So there is no change in the intrinsic um, quality of this paper. It's still paper, but it just changed its size. Or if I crumple it, it's still paper. It just changed its shape. Okay, so this is an example of a physical change. Okay. So how about chemical change? So when there is a chemical change happening in a substance, so there is a change in the intrinsic characteristic of the substance. So there can be a change in, let's say for example, if this paper is not going to be paper anymore. So can you think of some scenarios? Yeah, can you think of some scenarios wherein chemical change is present? You can comment on the comment section so that I can see your answers. And so I will still count that as your recitation if ever you comment on this video. Okay? Sa comment section ng YouTube, o diba, walang chat box kasi pag recording. And okay? So, yan, may mga na-chat na ba kayo? Pwede nyo i-pause muna. Okay? So, so one example is when yan. So, when we burn this paper, so this paper is no longer paper. Hindi na siya white. Yung intrinsic characteristics niya magiging iba na. Okay? So, another example is I have here some baking soda. Kung kita niyo yung baking soda yan. And I also have here, vinegar. And so we already did this last year during your grade 9 quiz. And so I think this is one of the last experiments we did face to face. And so, do you remember your volcano performance task before last year? And so, actually, in that performance task, there is a chemical change present. So, yeah. So, as you can see here, and so ang ginawa natin noon ay pinagsama natin yung baking soda tsaka yung tawag dito, suka. Okay? So, let's just have a short observation. And so, meron akong mangkok dito, baka magkalat. And so, I think I'll just tilt the camera later. And wag kang aapaw, please. And so, let's see what will happen. And so, as you can see, and there is bubbles present. Nagbabubble siya. Okay, so I'm not sure kung kita nyo, pero lapit na lang natin ng onte. Ayan, so dagdagan pa natin. Ayan, so, ayan, naririnig nyo ba? Ayan, so every time I add suka or vinegar, as long as there is a baking soda available to react with it, it's going to release bubbles. Okay? So there is actually a chemical change. And nabula pa din. There is a chemical change present here. Okay, and when chemical change happens, ay, sorry, chunks. Oh my gosh. Wait lang. Ayan. So, back to me. Punasan ko saglit, natapon. And so, tabi ko lang dito. Anyway, yeah. So, that is one example of um, a chemical change. Okay, so there are certain evidences that we can find for chemical change. Okay, so meron siyang mga evidences. Okay, so now let us begin with our lesson. And so we will be talking about chemical reactions. Okay, so when chemical change is present, there is actually a chemical reaction. So let us define first what a chemical reaction is. So a chemical reaction is a process in which one or more substances, like called the reactants, are converted to one or more different substances called the product. So the reactants can be converted to products. So that is the chemical reaction in our mini demonstration earlier. So the reactants are the baking soda and the vinegar. And the products are the bubbles form. So it is in the form of carbon dioxide. So yung naririnig nyo na yan. So yun yung tawag dito, yun yung carbon dioxide na nabubuo from the reaction between the baking soda and the vinegar. Okay, next. So here are some evidences of chemical reactions. So when you see these things, then we can say that chemical change or a chemical reaction has happened. So first you have production of light. So when you have production of light, it means that, let's say for example, yung paper na to, sinunog nyo. So there is light produced. So there is a chemical reaction present in this one. Next, for evolution of gas, as you can see in our mini experiment earlier, there is evolution of carbon dioxide from the chemical reaction between the baking soda and vinegar. Next evidence of chemical reaction is temperature change. So, for example, when you are cooking something, or let's say for example, you added, dito, ayan, may inaalala ko na chemical reaction kasi parang I think I did an experiment before wherein I added something to to a solution and then it has an increase in temperature. So, kumbaga, tawag dito, nalimutan ko kung anong chemical reaction yun. Pero, basta, kapag merong temperature change, let's say for example, tawag dito, naging warmer, nag-increase in temperature, or kapag naging colder or nag-decrease in temperature, it is also an evidence of chemical reaction. So next is change in intrinsic properties like color, odor, etc. So this one is, for example, and performances ko nga pala ito sa inyo. Basta hindi ako magbigay na masyado example. And so change in intrinsic properties, basta nagpalit ng kulay, nagpalit ng amoy, nagpalit ng itsura. Ayan. So, basta yung intrinsic properties, you can search what are the intrinsic properties of an object are. And then lastly, last evidence of chemical reaction is the formation of a precipitate. So, kapag merong nabuo na, tawag dito, na solid object. Okay, so there are a lot of things wherein you can do to form a precipitate. Ayan. So, next. Ayan. So, what is, tawag dito, yan. For a chemical reaction, we can represent it using a chemical equation. So the chemical equation is the representation of the changes that took place in the reaction, which distinguishes between the reactants and the products. So the reactants are found at the left side, and then there is an arrow in between coming from the reactants pointing towards the products. So it means that from the product, it became, from the reactant, it became the product. Okay, so papunta siya sa product. Okay, and then the product is found at the right side of the chemical equation. Okay, so the reactants again are the original starting material in a chemical reaction. So, yan yung mga before. Okay, so ito yung mga materials natin before the chemical reaction occurs. And then the products are the new substances formed as a result of a chemical reaction. So yung product, yun yung nabubuo na after ng chemical reaction. Okay? So this is the chemical equation that we have from our baking soda. So baking soda is also called sodium bicarbonate. So we have here our chemical formula for sodium bicarbonate. And then it reacts with vinegar. So this is our chemical formula for vinegar. And so NaHCO3 yung baking soda. And then yung vinegar ay CH3COOH. And so it created carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide yung nakita niyong bubbles. And then water, it's liquid water. So dumagdag lang siya dun sa tubig na nandun. So we also have H2O. And then we also have sodium acetate, which is CH3COONA. Okay? And so this is how we designate a chemical equation. So all of the products are found at the right side and all of the reactants are found at the left side. And another thing to take note is that we use the we show the state of the substance. So for example, yung sodium bicarbonate, naku, mali yung nalagay ko dito. That should be S or solid. And so, wait lang. Annotatean ko na lang. Okay, so we will also, kasi for example, if a chemist is doing this experiment, so dapat is yan. Okay? So we will also put the state of the matter, kung solid ba siya, liquid or gas, or aqueous solution. So para malaman niya, kasi meron, di ba, meron tayong iba't ibang states of matter. So the chemist or whoever is going to perform the experiment should know what state of matter the substances or the compounds are. And so ito, tawag dito, ayan. So alam na yun nung gagawa ng experiment, dapat solid at hindi tunaw sa tubig yung baking soda natin. So that's why we put S there. And then we know that vinegar is in liquid form. So ito yung magiging liquid kung saan ibubuhos natin yung solid na sodium bicarbonate. And then we see here that CO2 is formed, or carbon dioxide is formed as a gas. So that is evident by the bubbles. And so, yan, ito yung bubbles na nakita natin. So ito yung ating solvent. And this is our solute. Okay, solute na ilalagay sa solvent. Okay? Yan. Tapos, this one is another product, and this one is also another product. When you say AQ, it is called an aqueous solution. So it means that something is tinunaw. And so, tinunaw siya sa tubig. Yan yung ibig sabihin ng aqueous solution. So, a substance is tinunaw. Hindi ko alam kung hindi ko matandaan yung English na nasa dulo na nila ko. So, ayan, dissolved. A compound is dissolved in a solvent. Yan. So, yun yung ibig sabihin ng aqueous solution. Okay? Ayan. So, next, let's have another chemical equation. So we have here methane, a natural gas, combines with oxygen in the air and burns carbon dioxide and in the air and burns. Carbon dioxide and water are formed. So we have here CH4, which is methane, in gaseous form. And then we have here O2, which is oxygen. Oxygen is one of our diatoms, which is tawag dito, and it exists as it doesn't exist ng mag-isa. So, lagi siyang may kasamang isa pang oxygen atom. And then, these uh, reactants will produce a product of carbon dioxide and water vapor. So, kasi, ayan, no, H2O. Since nakalagay na letter G, alam natin na gas yung nabuo. Okay? And so here are some of the symbols that we can use. So when we use plus, yan, it means that this is the combination of reactants or products. So the arrowhead here shows us the meaning of the product to be produced, to form, to yield. And these are our legend. So S for solid, L for liquid, G for gas, and AQ for aqueous solution. So substance is dissolved in water. When we have here two arrows, one going to the left and one going to the right, means that the chemical reaction is reversible. When we have here heat or a triangle found on top of the arrow, it means that heat is supplied or needed in the reaction. And lastly, if you have a formula written above or below the yield sign, indicates its use as a catalyst or a solvent. So later, iaano natin kung ano yung catalyst and its importance to chemical reactions. Okay, so in this case, we have here the element PT used as a catalyst for a certain reaction. Okay, and so as you can see here, we have to follow a universal law called the law of conservation of mass. And to do that, we have to balance our chemical equations. Hindi lang tayo basta-basta na maglalagay ng mga chemical compounds in a certain equation. They have to be balanced so that we can follow the law of conservation of mass. So it says here that this law says that the mass is not created nor destroyed, it just changes in one form to another. So the mass of the reactants should be equal to the mass of the products. Ayan. So as you can see, this equation that we have here is not balanced. Let's try to count the number of atoms. Sorry, let's count the number of atoms that we have here. Okay? So, titignan natin yung both reactant and product side. Okay, so here in our, hitiin natin to. Ito yung reactant side, ito yung product side. Okay, so we have here carbon. So, ilan yung carbon sa buong reactant side? We only have one carbon. For hydrogen, how many hydrogen do we have here? So, we have 4. And then for oxygen, we have 2. So let's go to the product side. So how many carbon do we have here? We have 1. How many oxygen? We have 1, 2 here, and 1 here. So 2 plus 1 oxygen here is we have 3. And then how many hydrogen do we have? We only have 2. So as you can see here, it's not balanced because we only have 1. The carbon is balanced because we have 1 carbon for both sides. But hydrogen and oxygen is not balanced. As you can see here, we have 4 hydrogen atoms in the reactant side. What happens to the other 2 hydrogen atoms in the product side? So, kailangan magbalanse siya. So, hindi siya balanse ito. And then, as for the oxygen, we have here 2 oxygen atoms here at the reactant side. But here in the product, it became 3. So, saan nanggaling yung isa pa na oxygen? Diba? So, hindi siya balanse. So, what we can do is we can balance these equations by multiplying a numerical coefficient in front of in front of these chemical formula. So, pwede tayong maglagay ng numerical coefficient dito sa harap. Okay, so punta muna tayo sa next slide para mas clear. Yan. So, mag-off cam muna ako para makita. Yan. So, right here, we have here the total number of, so ito lang din naman yung sinulat ko kanina. So, what we're going to do is you have to multiply. So, since yung total ng carbon ay okay na, so titignan natin yung sa iba. So, when we do balancing chemical equations, this is mostly done by trial and error. So, magta-try at magta-try ka talaga ng kung ano yung multiply mo na whole number dito. So, for example, ayan. So, for carbon, equal naman siya. So, huwag na natin galawin. So, since we have 4 hydrogen at the reactant side and we have 2 here, so para maging 4 din itong number 2 na nasa kanan, ano yung pwede nating i-multiply dito? Pwede tayo mag-multiply ng 2. Okay, so since mag-multiply tayo ng 2 dito sa H2O, damay ngayon pati si oxygen times 2. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4. Then 1 times 2 is 2. So ngayon yung 2 magiging 4 na. And then ito, and so ito namang baba, so 2 plus 2, yung 3 magiging 4. So let's look again. So you have carbon is balanced, so you have 1 and 1. Hydrogen is balanced, you have 4 and 4. For oxygen, we have 2 at the reactant and we have 4 in the product. So since hindi na naman sila equal, mag-multiply tayo. Okay, so ano yung pwede natin i-multiply dito sa O2 para maging 4 din yung total number of oxygen sa reactant. So, we can multiply 2. So, wala namang madadamay na ibang element. So, 2 times 2 is 4. So, from 2, magiging 4 na siya. So, ngayon, tignan natin kung balance. 1 and 1 balance. 4 and 4 balance. 4 and 4 balance. Okay? So, yan. Ngayon, isulat na lang natin sa blank yung magiging number nila. So, since wala naman tayong multiply sa CH4, so let's leave it as is. But in Aralinks, I will be using a gap fill for this one. So, pag wala kayong i-multiply, maglalagay kayo ng 1. Okay? But, since mag-input kayo ng 1. Okay? Pero in reality, hindi naman talaga tayo naglalagay ng 1. Pero para lang may sagot dun sa gap fill. Ayan. So, kaya maglalagay kayo ng 1 na coefficient sa Aralinks. Okay? So, dito, 2. And then, here at CO2, wala rin tayong nilagay. So, 1. Then here, 2. So, it means that our equation is already balanced. Okay? Kasi meron tayong sinusunod na proportion. So, hindi natin pwedeng bago-baguhin lang yung basta. Okay? Yan. So, I think we have 2 more examples next. And so, I'll just clear my... Yan. Okay, let's go to the next example. And so, you have your aluminum, BaO, Al2O3, and Ba. Ayan. So, annotate tayo already. Ayan. So, check natin ngayon. So, meron tayong aluminum na tig-isa, 1, and then 2. So, ngayon, kailangan natin dagdagan to. So, let us multiply 2. Okay, so ngayon, magiging 2 na ito. So, 2 and 2, check. 1 and 1, check. So, dito naman 1 and 3. So, we have to increase this 1. So, mag-multiply tayo ng 3 dito. Since kasama si barium, magdadamay siya. So, 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 3 is 3. So, yung 1 magiging 3. Ito magiging 3. So, 3 and 3, tama na. Kaso nga lang, double check natin ulit. 2 and 2, balance pa rin. Pero since nagalaw itong si barium, 3 and 1 na. So, hindi na siya balance. So, para ma-balance, we have to increase the 1 at the product side. So, we have to multiply it to 3. Yan. So, para maging 3 na din siya. So, 3 and 3 balance na siya. Okay? So, again, we have 2, 3. Wala tayong multiply dito. So, 1 and then 3. Kasi kung face-to-face tayo, hindi ako magpapalagay ng 1 dito. Pero for the sake na para dun sa ARA links, maglalagay ako ng 1 dyan. Okay? And next. So let's go to our last example. So ito, mas maraming elements. Ayan. So we have here potassium chromate, silver nitrate to form ano to? Silver chromate ba to, and potassium nitrate. Parang nagbaliktad lang si K at si AG. Anyway, yeah, so let's check again. We have 2 potassium here, 1 potassium here, so hindi siya equal. So we have to multiply 2 here. So times 2, damay yung iba, times 2, times 2. So we have here 2, 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 2 is 2. So ngayon, ito ay 2 na. Tapos ito, 6 plus 4 is, from 7 it will become 10. And then from 1 it will become 2. So let's check again with balance. So 2 and 2 balance. 1 and 1 balance. 7 and 10. So hindi sila balance. You have to increase at the reactant side. So what can we change so that it can be also equal to 10? So meron tayong 4 and 3. So we can just do the same thing. Multiply 2 to 3 so that we can get 6. Okay, so 4, kasi 6 plus 4 is 10. So pwede rin natin gawin yan. Okay, so 3 times 2 is, and damay din pala to, times 2. Ayan, damay-damay kasi ito. Pag nag-multiply ka sa isa, mag-multiply din lahat. Kaya ako siya pinagsama-sama sa isang column. Okay, para hindi kayo malito. And so 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. And 1 times 2 is 2. So 6 plus 4, this will become 10. So 10 and 10, tama na yan. So this will become 2. This will become 2. So let's double check. 2 and 2. And so balance na siya. Then for nitrogen, we have 2 and 2. So na-carry over na, nag-balance na din siya. So again, let's write 1, 2, 1, and 2. Okay? Do you have any questions? And you will have some exercises later. So next. And so for the next part of the lesson, ayan, clear ko muna to. Ayan, and pakita lang ako. Ayan. So, next is you have types of chemical reactions. So, meron kasi tayong 4 basic types of chemical reactions. So, pag-aaralan natin ito, and we also have a certain pattern for them. Okay? So, first you have the combination reaction. So, for combination reaction, they happen when 2 or more reactants combine to form only one product. So, the general formula for this one is you have yung A and B, pwede siyang element, pwede siyang compound. Okay? So, and we have A or reactant A plus reactant B will form one product. So, for combination reaction, there will only be one product at the right side. Okay, so one example for this one is we have ethylene glycol is a substance used in making polyester fiber. So, to produce it, ethylene oxide will combine with water. So, yan, para mabuo yung ethylene glycol. So, this is the chemical formula. We have C2H4O in gaseous form. combined with H2O in liquid form to form CH2OH. And yan, lahat yan ay 2 para makabuo ng ethylene oxide. So, yun yung pattern niya, ha? Next, we have decomposition reaction. So, the decomposition reaction is the reverse of a combination reaction. So, this happens when one reactant, so it means that since it is the reverse of the combination reaction, we should only have one reactant on the reactant side. So, isang compound lang siya. Okay, so it can break down into a more simpler compound or to an element. So A, B will resort to A plus B. So kailangan iisa lang yung nasa kaliwa kasi nagde-decompose lang siya. Okay, so one example is the anesthetic used by dentists is dinitrogen oxide called laughing gas. And that is produced by the decomposition of ammonium nitrate into dinitrogen oxide gas and water vapor. So ngayon, meron tayong decomposition of ammonium nitrate, which is NH4NO3 in solid form so that it can produce N2O, which is the laughing gas, and water vapor. So, 2H2O. So, ito balance na to, balance equations na yung mga pinapakita ko dito, And so, yun yung ating decomposition reaction. For single replacement reaction, so this happens when a reactant made of one element reacts with a compound and replacing one of the elements of the compound which will produce an element. The one replaced and a compound is the product. So for example, we have A, which is the element, and BC as the compound. So what happened in single replacement reaction is that the element C, yeah, so yung letter C na element dyan, so it will be displaced. So kumbaga kaya nga siya single replacement kasi papalitan niya. Okay, so parang ano lang yan, parang yan, hihiwalayan mo yung dati mo. Ano ba yun? Nahugot na naman. Hihiwalayan mo yung dati mong kasama para may dumating na bago. Yan. So, magiging iba na yung kapartner ng element. Okay, so, kumbaga, nare-replace na yung luma. Okay. So, yan. So, A plus BC will result to AC plus B. So, ngayon yung element na nag-replace is yung B. Okay, yung nagpalit dito is ang nagpalit dito ay si A tsaka si B. Okay? So an example for this one is an electronics engineer would like to remove some of the copper in a circuit board by submerging it in ferric chloride. So the copper atoms will replace the iron atoms in the circuit. Okay, so ito balance na rin siya, ha. So we have here copper. So this is an aqueous solution of ferric chloride. So what will happen is that the copper will replace the position of iron here. So kaya it will result to copper chloride, and then we will have here iron displaced. Okay, so yan yung example ng single replacement reaction. Okay. So next is we have a double replacement reaction. This is the last type of reaction. So this happens when the elements in one of the reactants exchange partners with the other reactant. And this usually involves the cations and ions. And so kung tatandaan nyo kung ano yung cation at anions natin. And so what happens is that anions from the reactant compounds to form two entirely different product compounds. So, for example, para lang siyang dalawang couple na nagpalit ng partner. Ang pangit pakinggan, pero gano'n. So, kunwari, ang unang magka-partner ay si AB, tsaka si CD. Then, after a chemical reaction or after some events, yung partner na ngayon ni A ay si D. At ang partner na ngayon ni C ay si B. So, ang nagpalit dito ay si B at saka si D. Okay, so kaya siya double replacement kasi dalawa yung na-replace. So dito, walang malungkot. Lahat happy kasi lahat may partner. Hindi tulad nung sa single replacement na yung isa mawawala ng partner. Diba? Okay, so one example for this one is And when solutions of sodium sulfide and hydrochloric acid are mixed, so pareho silang aqueous solution, the products of the reaction are aqueous sodium chloride and hydrogen sulfide gas. And so we have your Na2S and then HCl. So kung nakikita nyo, si Na, ang kapartner na niya ngayon ay si Cl. So ngayon, ito yung nagpalit. Tapos si hydrogen, kumbaga si sodium, tsaka si hydrogen. Okay? So sila kasi yung mga cations natin, yung si sodium tsaka si hydrogen. Usually, the elements found at the left side are our cations. Okay? So ngayon, it will result to NaCl. So ngayon, ang kapartner na ng chlorine ay si sodium. And then, ang kapartner na ngayon ni hydrogen, ay ang kapartner na ngayon ni sulfur ay si hydrogen. So, meron tayong gas na mabubuo dito. Okay? So, those are the four types of chemical reactions. Yan. So, yan. Okay? So, ba't parang nawala yung isa kong slide? Ayan, okay. And so the last part of our lesson is the factors affecting the rate of chemical reactions. So chemical reactions can happen fast or slow, but the rate wherein these chemical reactions occur can be changed because of these factors. So first you have the nature of the reactant. So the nature of the reactants determines the amount of activation energy present for a reaction to occur because there are compounds with low activation energy and high activation energy. So before I continue with the other factors, so meron kasi tayong tinatawag na activation energy. So the activation energy is kaya nga siya tinawag na activation energy because it has to be overcome for the chemical reaction to occur. But if it's not overcome, then the chemical reaction will not occur. So, so for example, ito, yung suka natin kanina, sige, huwag na palang gamitin yan. Basta tawag dito, merong mga reactants kasi na mabilis ma-activate para magkaroon ng chemical reaction. And then there are some reactants na tawag dito, sobrang bagal nila or sobrang taas ng activation energy nila. Kaya more energy yung kailangan ilabas para mangyari yung chemical reaction. Okay? Yan. Next is you have the concentration of reactants. So the higher the concentration of the substances, the faster the reaction will occur because there are more particles to interact with. So for example, di ba tandaan nyo last year yung mga groups na kaunti yung baking soda or konti yung suka? So since mas kaunti yung reactants nyo, hindi ganun kabilis mangyari yung reaction kasi konti lang yung reactants nyo. So the more amount or the higher the amount of the higher the amount of reactants that you have, then the faster the reaction will occur kasi mas marami silang mag-interact. Paano kung kulang yung suka nyo? Tapos marami pa kayong baking soda. So ibig sabihin nun, hindi, kumbaga, meron pang baking soda na pwede pang mag-react, pero since wala ng additional amount ng suka para mag-react doon, hindi mangyayari yung chemical reaction. So, kailangan madaas yung concentration. Okay? Then, the last two factors is, third, you have temperature. So, temperature, when we have the higher the temperature of substances, the faster the reaction will occur because of the increased kinetic energy of the particles. So we all know that temperature is the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles. And since kinetic energy is related to motion, and so since motion will make the particles move faster, so the chemical reaction will occur faster. Okay? So, ganun lang yon. And lastly, we have presence of catalysts. So catalysts are substances that do not participate in the chemical reaction, but their presence speeds up the rate of reactions of some chemical sorry of some chemical reactions. So catalysts are not used up. So for example, in a reaction, I used 5 grams of a catalyst. So before and after the chemical reaction, the catalyst will remain 5 grams because do not they do not participate, but they help in the rate of the chemical reaction. So kaya siya catalyst kasi tagapagpasimula or tagapagpabilis. Basta parang tagapagpaandar, yon. Yung catalyst natin para siyang tagapagpaandar. Okay? So kapag wala siya, pwedeng mas mabagal yung chemical reaction. Okay? Ayan. So that's it for our lesson today. See you next time. Okay? Goodbye, class. And